Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Studio Sessions at 2. My name is Michelle Adamas, and I'm so happy you're here. Today's a special video. With the blessings of my members, I am going to take you behind the scenes of our Artisan Circle membership. I'm going to show you the dashboard, how it's laid out, what's included, and I'm even sharing a tutorial from the membership. So at the end of this, if you would also like to join us, if this sounds great to you, there's a link in the description for you to find out more and to join us. So let's get started, and happy creating. With a look inside the dashboard, when you first join the membership, you are going to be taken to this welcome page, and we call this our dashboard. You're going to see a video which is going to help you navigate the site. I'm going to take you through that here. But on this page is the hub. It's where you're going to find everything that you need. You'll be able to access every tutorial in the Artisan Circle library. You can see that we have many tutorials here, and I'm going to give you a quick look into the one that we're going to be doing today so that you can see what that looks like. When you click on a particular video, you are going to see an about this lesson over here that tells you a little bit about what we're doing. You're going to find a supply list, and I've tried to make this as simple as possible, so you'll see that these are actually links to the printable collections that we're using in this project, and I also share tags and links for products that I'm using in case these are something that you would like to do as well. So from here, after I've watched the video, I can go back to the dashboard. I never have to leave that video to access my printables, but if I do want to access printables, I can come back to the dashboard and click on the library of printable collections, and you will see that we have many collections of printables. And each has at least 4, some have 9. It really depends on what we're working with. And these tutorials come twice a month, so once on the 1st of the month and once on the 15th of the month, and new printables are added every month as well. Also from the dashboard, you can join our private Facebook community and access replays of any of our Zoom sessions. We had started a couple of months ago meeting live, and we will continue to do that once or twice a month, depending on everybody's schedule. But this is where you can find everything. So as you can see, I'm going to go back to the videos and give you an idea of what you can expect. These are really pre-recorded videos that don't take a ton of time. You can visit them at any time that you would like. We are doing color mixing and creating a custom palette for one of our printables this month, and then creating with that. We've done mixed media. We've used printables to do fabric projects, clay projects, made our own papers, decoupaged, done just so many things, and we would love to have you in the membership. But for now, as promised, I am going to take you to a video inside the circle and share that with you. You'll find the link to the membership in the description, and if you have any questions, please reach out to me. I'd be happy to hear from you. Thanks so much, and let's get to creating. Hi everyone, and welcome to another tutorial. I'm so happy that you're here. In this tutorial today, we are going to be working with color. And specifically, we're going to look at techniques for isolating color. Sometimes we find a beautiful paper, or we're really intrigued by something, but maybe the color is a little shocking. And so we're going to look at techniques for softening that a little bit. I call it color isolating. That was the best term I could come up with for it. But we're also going to look at collage with collage. So this month's paper is a collage that was created from old papers. So I purchased some original and old ephemera and created a collage, and then created several colorways for you to choose from. So feel free to use the paper I'm using, feel free to use the stamp that I'm using, or do something completely unique to you. I look forward to seeing what you create. So you're going to see something kind of funny. There was something that I think we can all relate to as I was going through this project. There were a couple of moments when I thought, oh my gosh, I have completely ruined this. But I'm happy to share how I at least think I recovered and share this technique with you. Basically, I'll give you a hint. White paint is your best friend. And I had some surprises along the way. And so I'm excited to share those with you. So I'm going to stop talking and we're going to get to creating. Enjoy this tutorial. Happy creating. For this project, I'm going to be using the bronze paper for February, and I printed it on photo paper matte on rice paper. I'm going to be using the IOD sunflower stamp, Stays on ink in black and timber brown, and vintage photo by Ranger. I'm also going to be using the materials that the new ones are the matte gel medium, a Stabilo pencil, and a fine liner pen. And these are the paints, so you can always refer to these supplies as we go along. I'm working on a 12 by 16 canvas panel, and although the paper that is for the month of February is already a collage, this is a way that you can piece together a collage and turn it into a new one. And so I'm going to start by tearing up my paper. I'm going to make sure that all of them have torn edges. And one of the things that I want to do first is to apply a coat of matte gel medium over my entire canvas. This is going to fill in some of the raised texture that is inherent with a piece of canvas. And I'm going to just start by piecing these together. And so I'm just taking it a little bit at a time and smoothing them out. I will eventually, when I have this in place, go ahead and sand off any of the excess edges. But this is a fun way to make sure that you can create something new out of a sheet of paper that's already a collage. And I like it because different parts of the paper are going to show up underneath our final image. And I really love that. So this is just another way to get a piece of paper that might be a little small to fit. I did end up using 2 sheets of this February bronze paper to create this collage. So this is a technique that I encourage you to try. You can just create something unique. Every time you do it, it's going to be a little bit different, and I just think it's a fun technique. The next thing I'm going to do is apply 2 coats of my Degas fixative to my collage paper, and I'm going to let each coat dry in between. I'm then going to apply 2 coats of my clear gesso by Liquitex, and this prepares our paper and our project for paint and other mediums that we're going to use. I'm going to let each coat dry in between. I usually speed it up with my hair dryer. I think you've realized that about my process by now. I'm using the beautiful sunflower stamp by Iron Orchid Designs, and to apply it to my paper, I'm using Stays on ink in timber brown. It dries more quickly, it's waterproof, and I'm just going to play around with the position of my flower. I'm just going to do a single stem on this project. When you're applying it to your surface, it's easy if you hold it down with one hand and lift up with the other and apply pressure. You can transfer the design as well as see where you may need a little more pressure. Once the flower was in place, I decided to add the stem, and I'm using the included mask to make sure that that stem goes behind the petals. I'm then going to keep that mask in place while I just do the leaves for the design, and now I feel like I'm ready to go because my design on my paper is complete. This is the step where the isolation of color begins, and I think it's such a fun step to do. I am mixing titanium white acrylic paint with fluid matte medium. The titanium white is very opaque, and by adding the fluid matte medium, I'm going to give it plenty of transparency. it's always better to start with less and add more than to go too heavy on your application and not be able to take it away. So I wiped off my palette knife with a baby wipe, and I'm using that to begin to fill in a lot of the larger areas. And then I'm just wiping back with the clean part of the baby wipe, just because at least at this point, I really do want some of that collage paper to show through this layer. And so the baby wipe is a great way to go. I think everybody should have them in their toolkit. And so here what I'm doing is I'm filling around the more delicate areas, like around the leaves and the petals. I'm using a brush. I'll use several different brushes. So you may want to have a larger brush, a medium-sized brush, and even a fine line brush to do this section. I'm just carefully going in, and you'll see me wiping back with the baby wipe as I go along. And I really just love how this begins to isolate that sunflower, and it makes that sunflower the focal point of our project. I'm going to go ahead and store that excess paint and matte medium mixture in a little condiment cup because I'm sure we're going to use it later. And so I like these little, you can get them at the Dollar Tree and they've got a lid. So I like these for storing extra paint. Here comes the really fun part. We're going to start painting our sunflower, and I'm going to begin with the burnt umber paint and again some fluid matte medium to make it transparent. And I'm going to use this brown in a couple of ways, but to begin, I'm going to take a small brush, and once that paint is really mixed up well, I'm going to test the transparency on a scrap piece of cardstock, and then I'm going to paint in that stem. And I, again, think that it's best go lightly and then add more if you need to. I'm going to use that same mixture with a Q-tip and just kind of tap in some seeds. And then I'm going to tap in some more seeds with the full strength, no matte medium paint. And so this is just going to give me some shading and some interest in that center of the flower. And then it's time to do the leaves. So I'm using one of my favorite colors, which is Green Gold by Golden. It's a fluid acrylic. And while it is transparent, I'm still going to mix in some fluid matte medium. And I'm going to begin to paint out sections. I may do the whole leaf. I think you have to play with this and see what you like. But I definitely want to get some variation in color. And so I like to start with my lightest color and then add dark if I need to. So here I'm adding the deep green permanent acrylic paint. I'm putting a little white off to the side, and again, I'm adding my matte medium and a little bit of water. I want to make sure that I can get the transparency and the different shades of green that I may want for my leaves, and I am just going to play with this. I'm going to paint some darker green, medium hue green, and again, it's always good to test on a piece of cardstock. Just get that paint really mixed well, and you can pick up from various places in your mix of color. And we're going to give a lot of interest in shading and variation to those green leaves. Once the leaves are done, I'm going to begin working on the flower, and this is like my favorite part for sure. I'm mixing the cadmium yellow, the cadmium red. I'm going to have a little white that I've already got off to the side, and again, I am making sure that I've added water and I have some of my fluid matte medium. I'm going to start by giving everything a wash of that transparent cadmium yellow. And you may need to continue to add small amounts of fluid matte medium to your paint as you do this, just to make sure that it's transparent. Again, it's better to go light and add more. It's much easier to add than take away. So once that first layer of yellow is down, I'm going to add some cadmium red to my yellow mixture to create an orange. And I'm doing this because I want a lot of shading, a lot of different color. And I'm going to start around the center seated circle and add some of that orange. I think it just really brings out that seated area, and just more than one color is always a good idea. So we're going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to go all the way around that seated area. I'm using a brush, and I'm not being even about it because I want it to be as natural as possible. So it's going to be heavier in some areas, longer strokes, shorter strokes, all of that type of thing. And then once that is done, I'm going to add some yellow and white, and I'm going to add more color. I think this is just something of a preference that you practice with, and you just learn to add colors that you like. You might want to add this orange to the tip of your flowers, lighter areas, just add multiple bits of color. And so I'm going to take that brown mixture that we used for our seeds and our center medallion, and I'm going to add more white. I'm going to add more brown. I'm just trying to create a color that I can use for shadow. And again, I'm going to make sure that I've added even more matte medium to this mixture. And I'm going to use a brush, and just like I did with the white paint, I'm going to add with the brush and with the baby wipe, I'm just going to try to create a shadow effect. And so shadows are something that I personally am really learning about and working on. I've been practicing a lot on it. And it doesn't always have to be perfect. I'm not creating a fine art piece. This is definitely a mixed media, more of an abstract piece. And so just like I did for that white paint, I'm switching between brushes and baby wipes and wiping back where I feel it went a little heavy. But I'm thinking of my sunlight coming from one side and maybe the shadow coming from another. And I'm also going to go under the other leaf, just kind of creating almost like a short C shape. And I'm going to brush some of that in, and I'm just going to play with it. I am going to use that baby wipe, and I really love how wiping some of it back gives the entire piece a very organic feel. So I just encourage you to play with this technique, maybe on something small before you approach this project, or something bigger. But anyway, so once that shadow was created, I realized that where my typography was at the top of that sunflower was a little too stark for me. And so I wanted to cover it up a little bit while still keeping a lot of transparency in my flower. So I chose certain areas of the flower to go in with full strength paint. So at this step, I really wasn't adding the fluid matte medium. So in those areas where I felt the typography was too much of a strip at the top, I went over several times. I started with a light approach, and then I went a little darker, and I just went over those blooms until I was really happy with how the petals were looking. And I felt that the flower popped more, and it wasn't, the typography was there, but it was a little more subtle, and I really liked that appearance. On the lighter side of my painting, I'm mixing some of my yellow mixture with a lot of white and just adding some highlights to the petals on that side. I may add highlights in other places. Again, I think you just keep adding and subtracting, and that's really the fun part of the process. But think about your lights and darks and where you want them to appear. To create even more shadows, I added a little more of that burnt umber to my palette, and I'm just going in under the leaves with a small brush, and again keeping that baby wipe really close by, so I can wipe back where it goes a little heavy, but I just like a little of the shadow. So I'm going under the leaves, under some of the petals, and just adding a little more dimension and shadow. One of my favorite ways to add interest is to use a palette knife to apply paint. And for this particular project, I decided that I would try a little bit of the titanium white, and I'm using it full strength. So I did not add any of the matte medium to this mixture. I'm just using it full strength. And then I just picked up a smaller one. I use a few sizes of palette knives, one super thin, which is what you see me using here, and then I have a wider one. It really depends on what I'm working with. So if you can find a set, they're very reasonably priced. I do prefer the metal over the plastic, and I like the ones that are a trowel style. And so if you can find a trowel style palette knife, I highly recommend them. The trowel style makes them bendable and more flexible, which is great, especially when you're trying to get into small spaces. So I'm going to continue with the titanium white, and I'm just adding a little bit of interest where I went a little too heavy. I'm going to go ahead and wipe it back with a baby wipe. You know, I love my baby wipes. I keep saying it over and over again. And then I thought on the darker side that I would add some of the burnt umber. It looks a little scary when I first apply it, but by dabbing it with the baby wipe, and then I can also just use my palette knife to scrape some white over any areas that I've gone a little heavy in. Really, layering paint is just it's such a blessing when you're doing projects like this, because paint can almost act like an eraser. It can act like a highlighter. Here you can see that I had the not so bright idea at the time to add a little dark to the lighter side. I wiped some of it back with the baby wipe, but then it was also easy just to pick up a little bit of the white paint later on and just soften that a little bit. So don't be afraid. We all get maybe a little excited, a little exploratory, and I want to encourage you to do that and to not be afraid, because just like you can see here, I can add some white. I can make it act like an eraser. The important thing is just to paint and create and not be too tied to the results, and just keep exploring. So have fun with this. Okay, so remember when I said I thought I had ruined it? This is when it started to happen. I mixed a little white in my cobalt blue, and I had this little stencil, and I thought, oh, let's just add some color, right? And even though I could see that it wasn't turning out well, I kept going, and I just kept adding more blue. And I think I was just in I've already started. Let's just keep going. How bad could it be? And I was like, oh my gosh, I've ruined it. I think we've all been there, right? And I could have scrapped it, but this is where the challenge comes in. And this is where we learn the most, at least for me. I've always learned more from the things that didn't work well, but was so glad I tried, than the things that went just as I thought they should. So here I'm making it even worse. I thought, well, maybe I'll just try blending a little color with the blending brush, y'all. Well, it was time to figure out a solution. I tried my, using a palette knife to put on white. Nothing was really working. And I actually just let this sit for a bit until I figured out what I wanted to do. Sometimes walking away is the best thing that we can do. And then we discover new ways of doing things. I had even pulled out that original mixture and thought, oh, I'll just go over it with the white and that's going to fix things. But it didn't. Let's see where we go from here. So you would have thought that that little break, stepping away, would have resulted in a better decision. But Here we go again. I decided I'm going to pull out my favorite tool, which is a shelf liner roll from the Dollar Tree. And I cut out several pieces and I used my cadmium red and cadmium yellow and I mixed up a beautiful orange. And then I decided to apply color with that little shelf liner. So I use a brayer to apply the color and then I basically use it like a stamp. And I stamped all over this entire piece. I cut several pieces, so when one got too sticky or too gunked up, you really can't reuse them unless you wash them really well and let them dry. But in the end, I mean, can we all agree that after that break, all I managed to do was make this poor piece look like it had the measles? But I wasn't about to give up. And so here's where things really started to come together. As I used a baby wipe to kind of wipe back that orange, I think I even at one point thought, let me just see if I can remove it. But I started to blend in that color and something really interesting started to happen. I started to get this beautiful kind of yellowish, orangish, like really beautiful color coming in. And that's where things started to turn around. So at this point, I got excited again. You know how we love something, then we don't like it, and then we love it again. So here I just got this idea that, hey, this is really going to work out. I think it's going to be okay, and I have an idea. So as I thought to myself, hey, I may be onto something, I thought, let's just go for it. So I started mixing various hues of that color, adding more water, going full strength, and just using my baby wipe all the way around. And I started to feel hopeful again. And like, okay, we're onto something here, and this is really going to be okay. So I used a little bit of that and added some more kind of fuller strength orange, but just use that baby wipe to blend in. So again, baby wipes are an essential part of our toolkits. So then at this point I thought, I knew I wanted to do something with the edges. So I took out my vintage photo stamp pad and I went ahead and inked the edges. And I thought, oh, that's a really pretty look. But then there were a couple of places where maybe I went a little too far. And this is where it got really exciting for me, because as I took my baby wipe to wipe things back, I was just loving the vintage, antique-y, beautiful patina that vintage photo was giving to my piece. And so eventually what I decided was just to go all out with it. So I added more and more around the edges, and then again took my baby wipe and just blended and blended and blended. And this is when I really started to just love this piece again. And I was able to take my finger in the baby wipe and add heavier areas, lighter areas, add a little shadowing, all of that. I just really loved the beautiful patina and aging that the vintage photo stamp ink gave to this piece. We were really onto something here. I heat set the vintage photo stamp ink, and then I thought, gosh, I really want to make this a little more prominent. I really want to make this flower pop. And so one of my favorite ways to do that is to use a permanent black fine liner. And I went all over the flower, the petals, the leaves. I outlined things inside the petals. I outlined some of the seeds in the center medallion. I just added some really loose black lines, and I love how that turned out. A black liner can really just define your piece, and it can add a really interesting touch to your pieces. So I really encourage you to try that as well. I still felt it needed a little something, and so I pulled out my water-soluble Stabilo pencil. This is a dark pencil that when you add water to it, it is it's going to darken and thicken. So when you add water to it, that's what it means by being water soluble. So you're going to see the consistency of it change and the visuals change on it when you add water with the fine brush. So I added these little marks just to give it kind of a little bit of a frame around the flower. And then I felt like it still needed something I felt like the white space there on the right was a little too much. So I just picked up a little bit with that. And then I took the lid of my spray water bottle and I ended up dipping that into some jet black StazOn ink. And I just did 3 little circles. So I love odd numbers. I love that the circles weren't completely closed. And at this point, I was like, Michelle Adamas, you pulled it out of the hat and we're going to call it good to go. But as the commercial says, wait, there's more. So once again, I pulled out that extra white paint and matte medium mixture that I had, and I added some water to it, and I thought, let's just add a little white splatter. Splatter is always a sweet idea, and it just adds a little interest and a little whimsy to your pieces. And I promise at this point, I really was completely done. So in the end, I love how this project turned out, and am always glad that when in doubt, I keep going. Sometimes you need to step away. Sometimes it just all works out. But I learned so much along the way, and I hope you do too. I would love to know what in this video inspired you. Was it the technique? Was it the project? Was it the lessons learned? Was it what you learned not to do or things that you want to try? Whatever it is, I just hope you gain something from this video. More than anything, I hope that you will look at something colorful in a different way and learn how to adjust it to your preferences. Learn to use translucent layers. Learn to experiment, to not be afraid, and to never, ever give up. Happy creating, everyone. I'm going to see you in the next video in just a couple of weeks. I so appreciate your being here. I'm so grateful for you. Again, happy creating. So there you have it. I really hope that you enjoyed this glimpse into the Artisan Circle, learned a little bit about what's inside, what the videos are like, my process, my teaching style, and I hope you'll join us. Again, the link is in the description. But even if you don't, I hope that you learned something in this video, and I'd love to know what it is. I would so appreciate when you watch my videos here on YouTube that you would take the time to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and comment. It helps get my videos out further and encourages me to create more content. So thank you so much for being here. I appreciate all of you. I'll see you next week. And in the meantime, happy creating.